Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Denise Hampton. I'm a pre-health advisor at the UCLA Career Center, among other things. But for today's purposes, I'm a pre-health counselor. So welcome to today's Osteopathic Medicine, a unique path to medicine. Today's program is part of the pre-health application week in general. So Priyana, do you mind changing to the next slide? Um, so our pre-health application week is a bunch of different events for every sort of pre-health topic to help students learn about what the application process is like, what admission recruiters are looking for, help prepare you for it. And so as you can see here, the schedule of events and the different topics that we will be covering this week. And pre-health application week will be culminated by our pre-health fair. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So our health school fair this Friday at 12 to 3 p.m. Pacific time for those of you who are not on the West Coast. So this is an opportunity for you to sign up for one-on-one slots. So I just want to reiterate that. This is a career fair that you'll find on Handshake, and we'll put the link in the chat. But you want to make sure you actually sign up for one-on-one slots where you can meet with recruiters, admissions officers, have them answer questions about the application process, specifically about their program. You can compare programs in your field, as well as enter for a prize for test prep discounts. So definitely take this opportunity to, sign up for opportunities to connect with individual programs, the ones that you'll see today, as well as many more. So I just want to make sure you all know about that. Next, I want to introduce you all to our student organization, Sim, who will be moderating today's panel.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm Elisa, a third-year psychobiology major at UCLA. And
hi, I'm Brianna. I'm a third-year bio major at UCLA.
And we're here representing students for integrative medicine at UCLA to help facilitate this event. As a club, our mission is to promote integrative medicine, which is the combination of evidence-based modern or allopathic medicine, as well as complementary and alternative medicine, otherwise known as CAM, to provide a whole person approach to health. We hold workshops where speakers from different professions share their work and career paths. In the past, we had a physician from the UCLA Center of East-West Medicine speak to us about East-West nutrition, and we've also welcomed acupuncturists, herbalists, and DO students. As you can see on the slide, our upcoming workshops include topics such as integrative optometry, Tai Chi, and integrative psychiatry. Our meetings are open to the public, so we welcome everyone to attend. During the school year, we also participate in health fairs in collaboration with other organizations and host our own self-care and wellness fair. This quarter, we're organizing a 2-week wellness challenge that's expected to run from weeks 7 to 8 in an effort to promote health in its various aspects, including diet, exercise, and mental health. Like our other events, registration will be open to UCLA and non-UCLA students alike. As part of SIM, our members have the opportunity to present at health fairs, join committees to be a part of the event planning process, and publish their writing on our blog, as well as the UCLA Center of East-West Medicine website. During the regular school year, we also have a shadowing program with Yosan University of Traditional Chinese Medicine, which is currently on hold due to the pandemic, but is expected to return soon. And if you're interested in joining, you could scan the QR code on the slide or click on the links in the chats. And without further ado, Brianna will now introduce our guest speakers for today's event.
Thank you, Elisa. We will now begin the panel. Elisa will also be adding in questions from the chat that are pertinent to the topic at hand. Otherwise, all your questions will be answered in the open Q&A at the end. So Megan and Nigel, could you introduce your school, mission, values, and what makes your school unique?
I guess I can go first. My name is Megan Woodham. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions at the Alabama College of Osteopathic Medicine, or ACOM. Our mission kind of centers around 3 key points. We focus on graduate medical education through our residency readiness program. We do focus on team-based approach to learning and then the practice of medicine in that team-based approach. And then we do have a focus on primary care, although that is not a requirement to attend our school. And I think one of the things that makes our campus unique is our ACOM community. We really are an open, family-oriented community on campus. Because we only have osteopathic students on our campus, they really are the center of everything that we do. And I think that our students feel that and really get the most out of their education because of that.
Hi everyone, my name is Nigel James. I'm the admissions recruiter with Rowan SOM. We're located in Stratford, New Jersey, which is about 20 minutes outside of Philadelphia. The mission of our institution is to prepare future physicians and scientists who are committed to improving the health in New Jersey and that of the nation. And to do that, there are really 3 core principles. To do that, we develop in clinically skillful, compassionate, and culturally competent physicians from diverse backgrounds. We advance research, innovation, and discovery, and provide exceptional patient-centered care. And similar to Megan, I know one thing that you hear from students over and over again when you ask them directly, what is it about Rowan SOM that you can speak on? And it really is that family atmosphere. Again, as cliche as it may sound, it truly is the one thing that I hear over and over again. They really do. It is a collaborative environment more than a competitive environment. And I think students know that. They know they can go reach out to their faculty and peers and really just work with each other. And because at the end of the day, they're all really going towards the same exact goal, right? Which is to become a physician, hopefully a leader within their community.
Thank you so much for those helpful responses. Our next question would be, who would be a strong candidate and what qualities are you looking for?
So for ACOM, there really is that traditional question of what would make me a standout applicant, which I think is kind of where this question is stemming from, is what would make me a standout applicant. And to be honest on that answer is there really are very few quote unquote standout applicants. And usually it's not necessarily in a positive way. The best way to make yourself a good, strong, solid applicant is to just be overall that holistic view of your application. You don't have to be stellar in everything, but you need to be solid in everything. So for us, we of course look at the GPA, we look at the MCAT. We want to see students who have engaged in their community. So that can be accomplished through leadership, of course, through volunteer activities. And we also want to see people who have found ways, even in the pandemic, to engage in the learning of healthcare. So that could be virtual shadowing, it could be participating in talks like this, things that are showing and demonstrating to your admissions committee that you are committed to learning about this profession that you're attempting to get into or that you're contemplating getting into. And that you are trying to understand what that's going to be like. I know with the pandemic, that's been a little bit more difficult, but students who are taking those efforts to really understand what the practice of healthcare is, what the profession of healthcare is, not just the book piece of it, but also the humanistic side of it, which is difficult to learn and to teach in books. That's not something that you can learn that way. It's a hands-on experience.
I definitely, of course, have to agree with a lot of what Megan stated. I would say we really do value that holistic review, similar to the philosophy of a DO, which is that whole whole patient approach. That's exactly how we look at our applications. And I guess not to repeat everything that Megan said, but just to dive in a little bit more on one thing that she said, which is, what pretty much I think admissions committees are going to want to know, what have you done during this time of need? And you have to remember, you're competing with sometimes 7,000. I know for us, for instance, we had a little bit under 7,000 applications this year. So how do you stand apart from 7,000 other applicants? And I think I know it's easy for students to sometimes sort of check off that checklist that I need to get it done, and I think that's okay up to a certain point. However, I always tell students to really do what you love, because the committee members and your interviewer, they're going to know whether you really are passionate about a certain area. So don't just check off things for checking it off, but really find the things that you love, that you value, and do more of that, because that's what you're going to be able to talk on during your interviews. That's where your personal statement might develop its core passion. So really do what you love, and I would say again, it really is a applicant that is pretty much has many different qualities. It's not just your academics. That's one part, and yes, it is going to get you into med school in terms of being looked at, but there are many other qualities that you're going to need to be a great candidate. That can be from your journey, your passion, your dedication. It could be really many things.
Thank you. Our next question is, what does your admission process and timeline look like, and who's involved? Are there changes due to COVID?
So here at ACOM, we do a rolling admissions process. So of course, when the ACOMAS application opens in May, you can begin that process. Once we receive your primary application, although we do not have minimum requirements, we do use competitive averages for offering secondary and interviews. So once we receive your application and it's complete, that includes all of your, your MCAT, your GPA, those things. We would evaluate you on that and determine whether we would offer you a secondary. And about 70 to 75% of our primary applicants receive a request for a secondary. From there, the timeline kind of shifts to the applicant. So it's really sort of up to you. If you take 2 days to answer, then of course you're going to get processed faster than if you took 2 weeks. So depending on when your response comes in, we would then review all of your LORs, which, by the way, if you are not getting to know your faculty members, please do that. Those are a huge piece of what we look at, are your LORs. These are professors who know you, who have spent time with you. And so they're really able to provide some insight into who you are as a student. Once we evaluate that, and that can take anywhere from 7 to 10 days, just depending on the number of applications that we're dealing with at that time, but usually no longer than 2 weeks, we would then determine whether or not we wanted to offer you an interview. And that timeline then shifts back over into the applicant's hands in terms of when they want to schedule that interview. If you can schedule it for that very next one, that's great. If you have to wait for a couple of weeks, that would of course adjust your timeline a bit from there. Who is involved in our timeline? Our Director of Admissions, Ms. Linda Goodson, our Executive Director, Tara Riles, are both involved in sort of what we would call the pre-admissions piece of it, all the way up until offering the interview. And then at the interview point, you would begin meeting with professors at our campus. Due to COVID, everything was virtual last year. Our hope is that we will be able to open our campus back up to guests and start having applicants come back on campus, because we feel like that's actually one of our huge draws to our campus, is when you come on campus and are able to engage with our faculty and our staff and our students. And then after your interview, we have a decision to you within 10 business days. That would be the question, or that would be the timeline for you on that, would be 10 days after the application, or after the interview, sorry about that.
At Rowan SOM, our admissions process, it's very similar to the standard timelines. First week of May, you're able to start working in your primary application in ACOMIS. It's typically submitted in the middle of June, and we send out secondary applications to all students who've completed a primary application. Once your file is complete, which we typically recommend, the earlier the better, we start interviewing around sometimes the first week of September, and we interview all the way through the end of March of the following year. This year has been a little bit different. We're actually still interviewing. So, that can change. In regards to who's involved in your admissions process, and it's really our entire admissions staff, because you have many different people doing different things in regards to your application. In regards to changes to COVID, we did go virtual in terms of interviewing. We see that probably the same. That's probably going to be the same thing going forward. Everything really is dependent on different state regulations. So that is fluid. But at this point, what we've heard is that it's probably going to be a virtual experience. In terms of any other changes in regards to our letters recommendation, we don't require a DO letter. It is recommended, but we do understand the challenges that the last year has posed. So any letter from a physician would be fine. We are accepting online courses. In regards to the lab work being online, that is on a case-by-case basis. We do understand that at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of courses were being offered as pass-fail. And I think, we'll take that into consideration, but I think going forward, especially when it comes to your prerequisites, we really want to see a letter grade for your prerequisite courses. Other than that, again, things are remaining relatively competitive. And, if you ask me, how is that affected? It's still competitive. It is a competitive process. So you still want to remain a competitive candidate. I know there are many concerns, and that may be a question ahead, and I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself, but I know there's concerns about clinical experiences and different opportunities that students may have had. And again, I think it depends on finding the strengths in your application. So if you weren't able to do something, it's okay. There's probably still some time. Things are getting a little bit better, but it's also about how creative you are in finding unique opportunities and getting involved, whether it's working with your state helpline, COVID helpline, just really unique things like that.
Yeah, and since Nigel touched on it, I will go back and cover in terms of accepting online lab grades and things like that. If your university accepts pass-fail for that portion of your educational experience due to COVID, we will honor that. Same thing with labs. If labs transitioned to online and your school accepted those grades and accepted that coursework as satisfactory, then we will do that as well. Now moving forward, as campuses open up, if labs become in person, then of course that would be the expectation that you would take those in person at that point. I think that's everything that you covered there, Nigel. Once you talked about that, I figured.
Thank you for adding that. What are the components of a competitive application aside from GPA and test scores, and what are with consideration for personal statement, letters of rec, etc.?
So a couple of things for me, I mentioned earlier, letters of rec. Start getting to know your professors now. Start finding those individuals who are going to be able to write you those letters when you get ready for them. I know, if you're on here as a freshman and even a sophomore, you kind of think, oh, I have time. And you do. but never take for granted a professor with those instructors. I know at ACOM, your letters of recommendation from science professors have to be from the lecture portion. So if you're thinking that your lab professor is who's going to be able to write you a letter of recommendation, that may work at some institutions, but for us specifically here at ACOM, it has to be somebody who taught your lecture, not your lab section. You know, with regards to personal statements, I would kind of piggyback on something that Nigel said earlier about doing something that you're passionate about. Don't think that there's this perfect formula for a personal statement and that you are having to somehow force your story into this perfect formation or perfect formula. We can read between the lines. We've all gotten really good at reading personal statements, and we can tell when you're forcing it, when you are perhaps embellishing, which you should not be doing. We can tell when you are just not being genuine and authentic to you. And that's what we're looking for in those personal statements. Be true about what interested you in medicine initially, what drove you to this point. Another piece that I would always say, your personal statement, don't delve into something that we can find somewhere else on your application. If you did 500 hours of community service at the free clinic, you don't have to tell us that again. We can see that. Now, maybe you use one of the examples of a case that you saw there as a little anecdote of this is why I want to be a physician. I had this patient, you know, Mrs. Smith, and she really impacted me because that's fine. But don't restate your application in your personal statement. Use every inch of that application to tell us as much new things about yourself as you possibly can. If not, you're really wasting real estate on that application, restating all of the things that we can find somewhere else. What else would you add, Nigel?
So in regards to the personal statement, and hopefully I'm not I'm not saying anything wrong, but so many times I will look at a personal statement and it starts out with this, and I know we're taught, right, in college to do creative writing. So the statement starts out with, you know, like it was a dark, gloomy night, and like this whole intro. And honestly, that's not what we're really looking for. I tell students it's a personal statement, and it says that for a reason, because it needs to be personal. It's not an essay, it's a personal statement. So kind of, you know, eliminate all of the, you know, intros and like drama statements. Really just, we want to know, you know, who you are, why medicine. And I tell students, talk also about the future. Think of yourself 10 years from now. Which population do you hope to serve? Is there a particular policy you'd like to advocate for? You know, some sort of you know, health issue, national health issue that you'd like addressed? Because not only do I want to know who you are and, well, why medicine, but what is it about the future of medicine that you see yourself in? Because you will, you know, it'll take you another 5, 6, maybe 7 years, even longer, depending on the specialty, to actually really be a practicing physician. So what do you hope to do? And really, to me, that's the core of your personal statement. It doesn't have to be anything, you know, really flashy and really, you know, like a storybook, you know, like a novel. So I would say just be genuine, be authentic in your personal statement. As in regards to other aspects of, you know, your file that would make you competitive, in regards to experiences, we typically, so when we get an application, sometimes we see what's called a, like, you know, your experiences chart, and we can see how long you've done something, or and I think our committee prefers to see longitudinal experiences rather than the little dots of 40 hours of this and, you know, 20 hours of that, because again, it goes back to that checklist, right? Are you just crossing out these things because, you know, you're told to do it? rather than actually really committing yourself and showing dedication to a particular, a group or club or clinical experience. So I would say in regards to experiences, you really want to show more longitudinal things rather than just the little specks.
Yeah, I definitely would echo on that. I typically tell people quality over quantity. So make it quality experiences versus the quantity of them. It's a little hard to use examples in your interview on something that you only did for 8 hours versus something that you have longitudinal, as Nigel said, quality experiences that you can reflect on and use.
Really quick, I typically tell students to try to include everything that you've done, because I know quite a bit of times students try to get in the heads of admissions committees and say, well, is this medically related or not? So I shouldn't include it, but it's part of your journey. So whether you worked part-time at a retail store for 2 months or, it's part of your story. And sometimes that's the one thing that's going to set you apart from another applicant, because why? An admissions committee member may see that, wow, you worked while in college and you juggled this and you balanced that. So, try to list everything that has been part of your journey in your application.
Thank you for that. I feel like a lot of students have questions about that, and that was really helpful. The next question is, what type of experiences do DO programs look for students to have on their application? Are there considerations for impacts due to COVID? And should students consider taking a gap year to gain more experience, and would it help?
Experiences in terms of the type of experiences, obviously healthcare experience, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you went and volunteered at the hospital every week for 10 hours a week or whatever. Healthcare experience could be the free clinic, it could be shadowing, it could be scribing. So if you are somebody who needs to work through college, scribing is a good opportunity for that. So consider that. I go back to quality over quantity. We want to see experiences that have allowed you to engage in your community. And that might even be outside of healthcare. If you have a passion for the underserved or homeless or something like that, and maybe the homeless shelter is where you want to commit your time. Again, it's about that, as Nigel kind of referenced earlier, and I'm probably going to start stealing his little line there. Thank you, Nigel, about doing stuff that you're passionate about. I've not seen a single time where we've evaluated an applicant where we said that experience isn't valid or it doesn't add something to a person's application or to their, I don't want to say to value because you're all valuable, but value to them as an applicant. Considerations for impacts of COVID, yes, we will of course be taking that into consideration, particularly in this upcoming cycle, and the next cycle are going to be the ones where we're going to probably see the most affected by it in terms of their ability to engage, particularly in the hospital setting. We will accept virtual credit or virtual shadowing opportunity hours as well. So, take advantage of those. But as soon as you can start getting back into in-person experiences, again, I would encourage you to do that. There's nothing like learning in real life, hands-on. Taking a gap year, I never encourage or discourage a gap year for the purpose of gaining experience. Now, if you are talking about a deficit with regards to a GPA issue or an MCAT, that's another story. But in terms of experience, I would never encourage you or discourage you from that. What I would tell you is in that gap year, do something that's meaningful for your application. So if your gap year to gain experience is to go work in a bakery, because that's been your passion all your life, which I use that example because I actually have a student who did that. You know, you need to be doing something else. So maybe you're working in that bakery, but you're volunteering at a free clinic, or you're volunteering at a COVID hotline or something like that. So if you take the gap year for the experience, actually get the experience. But I don't necessarily think that you have to do it for the purpose, unless you, like I said, unless that's just something that you feel like would make you better prepared as an applicant. And would it help? Only if you can, you know, show value to it. So.
Yeah, I think we talked quite a bit about the experiences. I would make a comment on the gap year, which I think the language now we're trying to use is more of a growth year, because you are growing within those years. And according to a 2019 AMC survey, I believe about 44% of applicants took about 1 to 2 years of growth years, and about 13% took about a 3 to 4 year growth year. So it's not uncommon. It's the new traditional. But again, it really depends on what it is you need to gain out of it. And excuse me, I'm being summered. But you know, you have to know your application. You have to know exactly what it is that you're missing, you want to work on. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be something that you're missing per se. Again, if you're doing the things that you value, a possibility or an opportunity may come up where a particular organization wants you for an additional year. And it's not because you're doing it because you're missing something, but it's because it's something you value. So if you continue on the path of really doing the things that you love and you're passionate about, you'll be able to know yourself, know your application, and know what are the things that you want to do in those growth years. And again, the admissions committees and your interviewers are going to know, because it's going to reflect in your application, it's going to reflect in your interview, and it's going to reflect when you talk about it, because we'll be able to see the passion.
Thank you. And our last question for this structured portion is, what advice would you give to someone applying this upcoming cycle, or anything we haven't covered?
We've covered a lot already. I think what I would reiterate to you is be yourself on your application. Don't try to guess at what you think an admissions committee is looking for. Don't try to fit what you have defined in your head as the perfect applicant or the perfect med student. There is no such thing as the perfect. Everybody's application has a deficit somewhere. It's just not possible for you to get a perfect MCAT score, have a perfect 4.0 GPA, and get all of the extracurriculars, community service, and be the president of the SGA and everything else. So everybody's applicant has a deficit somewhere. So stop trying, that's what I tell my advisees all the time, stop trying to fit what you have defined as the perfect applicant, and be yourself, be self-reflective. That's a word that you'll probably hear quite a bit as you move through the next couple of years of your journey towards medical school, is self-reflection. And one of the questions that I have an admissions committee advisor or admissions committee member that says all the time, but why? You'll say something and he'll go, but why? And he's constantly challenging not just our applicants, but us as well to go, but why? Why do I think this? Why do I feel this? Why do I believe this? Why do I want to do this? And so you should constantly be evaluating the but whys in yourself, but why medicine? And a little bit of tidbit, the answer to why you want to be a physician is not to help people. That is not the correct answer to that question.
I definitely agree with that. You certainly have to put more thought into it. But I would say my advice is to definitely don't give up. If anything, this past year has shown us that we need aspiring, physicians like yourselves. So don't give up. It's going to be tough, and it's probably going to get tougher. But I would say don't give up. We're here to help, and we're here to help guide you through. I know for SOM, we actually offer one-on-one consultations, which I know it's not something that a lot of schools actually do because due to human hours and being able to do it. But that's something we really invest in, is to talk to our candidates one-on-one. And you can actually book that online. And what you do is you can upload copies of your transcripts, your CV, anything that you'd like uploaded. And then we meet for 30 minutes in a setting like this, and we just talk about your journey. You tell me a little bit about your story, and we dive into your transcripts and different parts of your application. And I try to be as transparent as possible with applicants. It could be things they may not want to hear, but I try my very best to be transparent. And we're here to help you, so don't give up.
Well, if you're going to plug your personal one-on-one advising, I'm going to plug mine too. We also do one-on-one advising. Unfortunately, the online portal is not available, so you've got one up on me on that one, Nigel. But you can email us, and we will do the one-on-one advising as well, and really take a look at your personal circumstances and situation. And like Nigel said, it's not always a conversation that is comfortable or easy. We're certainly not going to tell you, how wonderful you are at everything, because like I said, there are deficits, and it's our job to be encouragers and to really kind of push you to evaluate where you are and be honest with you with where you're at. But we do it in a supportive and constructive manner.
Thank you so much. We will now move forward to the open Q&A, which Elisa will help moderate. So
if I may just plug in, if all of the students today joining us can please share your feedback by scanning this QR code. And I will put the link in the chat as well, while you also submit questions to the Q&A. And if you could please do that in the public chat, so that Elisa can see the questions and you all can see what questions have already been submitted. Lisa, take it ahead.
Thank you. That about sums it up. So if you do have questions, please put them in the chat box now. But in the meantime, we've received a few questions already about what the differences between MD and DO schools are, both on the admissions level as well as the curriculum, if you wouldn't mind touching on that.
Sure. So, really what I typically, when I do a presentation, I always ask students what they know about osteopathic medicine, just because I like to hear what's still floating around it. And I know there's quite a bit of myths and misconceptions that are still there. I think we're slowly chipping away at it. But really, some of the biggest differences would be, of course, in the osteopathic philosophy, right? Doing the mind, body, spirit, and really taking a whole patient approach. And with that philosophy, it's incorporated within the curriculum. So the curriculum in itself, it's med school, it's tough. You're going to be taking pretty much the same, med school courses as MD students. But the difference, of course, would be your osteopathic clinical skills. It would be this 200 hours of what's called osteopathic manipulative treatment, which is you're pretty much taught to use your hands to feel and palpate the muscle for dysfunction. And then you're trained to treat the patient using your hands. So that's a core, difference. And in fact, it's actually more tools in your toolbox. And I know there's quite a bit of allopathic physicians now wanting to do this training because they do see that it's a great benefit to have, because again, alongside your allopathic physicians, you're doing anything and everything, any type of specialty. In fact, our students have always matched into really competitive specialties every year. So there really isn't anything, the sky's the limit. But really, that's some of the core differences. Megan, I'm not sure if you want to add in anything in there.
Yeah, I usually tell students it's easier to tell you how we're similar than it is to tell you how we're different, because, you know, at the core of everything, there are 6 competencies that you're taught in med school, that you're evaluated on your board exams, whether it's COMLEX or USMLE, all of that kind of stuff. And that's your patient interaction, your medical knowledge, your team-based practice, practice-based learning, all of that kind of stuff. That's the same. So if you go to a DO school and your BFF goes to an MD school, at any point in your curriculum, you all should really be able to sit down and have the exact same discussions. You should know the same materials in terms of, you know, the overall medical knowledge that you're learning, the clinical skills that you're learning. The only thing as a DO student that you're going to have, like Nigel said, is that additional training of that hands-on techniques to treat that somatic dysfunction in the body.
Perfect. Thank you for your responses. We just received another question in the chat. So we have an international student from India who's wondering if the path to become a physician is different for them. And if so, in what ways?
Well, the first thing, of course, would be identifying a school that accepts international students. So one of the things that you can do, I know Nigel just put up the Choose DO Learn About Osteopathic Medical link. That choosedo.org website is chock full of information. And one of the things you can actually do on there is search for international students. And there's a list of schools who are in the osteopathic world on Choose DO. I'm sure that the MD version has something similar that accept international students and what those requirements are. For ACOM, right now you have to be a US citizen or a permanent resident to be accepted into ACOM. And so the first step for you as an international student would be identifying those schools who are able to accept non-US citizens or permanent residents. For that, moving forward past that, there are physicians that you know, go on to use their medical education and get visas and things like that to be, you know, to work here. But long term, you know, in terms of staying to work, you would have to go through the traditional visa process to be a long-term resident.
So Rowan SOM actually, we accept international applications. With that being said, in full transparency, again, I believe in that, it's tough, right? Again, looking at the numbers, 7,000 applications for just about 200 seats. So it's usually pretty rare, I guess. So even though we accept applications, it's maybe, I think we had one international student like a year ago, or the class before. So it's going to be tough, but again, it's not impossible, but it's definitely going to be challenging.
Yeah, and most of that I think you'll find is if you go and you look at the mission statements, I didn't give our formal mission statement earlier, but if you look at the mission statements of the schools, a lot of osteopathic schools are invested in meeting the physician shortage in the areas where they are established. So while even at ACOM, we accept students from, out of state, we actually have more students from Florida. And California is actually in our top 5. We are looking for physicians or students that are going to become physicians who are going to meet that shortage in the US. And I think, in the state and in the US or around the country, I think most osteopathic schools are going to
Megan, I think you might have froze for a bit for everyone.
Did I freeze or did Nigel freeze? Am I there?
No, I'm here.
What about me? Am I here?
Now you're here.
All right, I'm here.
Hear both of you.
Okay. I don't know where I cut off, but basically just saying, most osteopathic schools have a desire to educate and meet the physician shortage around the country. And so like Nigel said, I think you're probably going to have not an impossible climb, but a little bit of a challenging climb.
Awesome. Thank you both for clarifying that for us. And we have another question in the chat that's, if you become an MD, how are you able to get osteopathic experience later?
So Megan, I'm not sure if you know the exact pathway, but I do know that you can fulfill that 200 hours of training, but I'm not sure if there's an exact like formal certificate that they can do.
I don't know about a formal certificate. I know that there are some institutions that provide fellowship, essentially, opportunities. The only reason I know this is actually we have a DO that has the initial 200 hours, obviously. He was going through this additional training as well, so that he can chair osteopathic principles and practices at, an institution. So I know that there are fellowship hours that are, or fellowship programs that are out there where essentially you go back to school at a DO facility. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think it's VCOM, but I think there is one in the Carolina area that has one. But there is essentially, it's a fellowship opportunity, but they are very hard to come by. I'm not going to lie on that one either. Don't be bringing that cute dog in here trying to recruit students. I got 2. I'll go get one.
They always know the right time when to show up, right?
I know, right?
So that's all the questions we have at the moment. If anyone wants to say their questions out loud, you can also raise your hand and do so. Annalyn?
Hi, so thank you to our panelists again for coming to talk to us. I really thought this experience is very valuable. A question that I had to ask was regarding the way that letters of recommendation are. I have heard that when it comes to submitting our LORs to osteopathic schools, that one of the requirements is having a letter of rec from a DO. Is that something that is correct, or is there any way I can kind of, I guess, navigate the answer to that?
So for us at ACOM, it is DO, the way it's worded is DO preferred, MD, no. How did they word it? Okay, DO preferred, MD accepted, that's it. So we prefer a DO, but certainly an MD is accepted, and you would not be surprised that the majority of the physician letters that we get are actually from MD physicians. In terms of navigating it, the benefit of getting a DO letter is to demonstrate to the admissions committee that you have seen the practice of osteopathic manipulative treatment in person, real life experience. If you are looking for ways to do that, start with your state osteopathic association. Every state in the country has a state osteopathic association, medical association. Here in Alabama, it's called ALOMA, AL for the initial of Alabama, and then Osteopathic Medical Association. But just Google California Osteopathic Medical Association. It'll take you to that website. I've been to it several times. I just don't remember what its little acronym is. And there's a contact option where you can contact that state association, letting them know where you are located and if they can provide you with any names of physicians who are in the area. And you can reach out to them specifically about shadowing opportunities if you're really interested in the osteopathic experience and just wanting to see what it's like to use that technique in an actual practice. So that's where I usually tell my advisees to start. But to answer the actual question is DO preferred, MD accepted. For ACOM, I don't know about.
It's the same, yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say,
Thank you.
I feel like I knew that, but I wasn't gonna commit to it. And I think that's what you'll find, Annalyn, at most of them. I'm not Nigel might could tell you for sure if he knows, but I'm not aware of any osteopathic school that requires the DO letter. It's just
there's actually a few
okay.
that do require it, and and I think for those schools, students should contact them directly. Given COVID, I think their processes might be a little bit different now, so you'd have to find out more from them.
Yeah, that would be the other thing, when we talked about earlier, other things to note that we haven't talked about. Pay close attention, on each of the websites of the schools that you're visiting, what their requirements are. Our LOR requirements clearly are different with regards to some of us accepting MD letters. The other thing would be is, make sure that you know what is and isn't required at, from the prereqs side of things. I always use the example of our school versus the prereq requirements from Oklahoma State, because their list is real long of the requirements, and ours is considerably shorter. So make sure whatever schools it is that you are evaluating, that you're looking at attending or applying to, that you know what those requirements are for each of those before you start the application process. Because if you're short 3 or 4 classes, you don't want to get too far down that road and determine or realize that you don't meet the eligibility requirements.
Thank you again for answering my question.
Okay.
So we have another question about if attending DO or MD schools affects residency placement into surgical programs, such as orthopedics, plastics, or neurosurgery.
Okay. I'm gonna jump in and take this one. This is a really good. This is a really good question. So, again, this is one of those common, I guess, misconceptions here,
yeah.
And it is actually further, from the truth is that because at the end of the day, it's about competitiveness, right? Because now students are going into the single matching system, both DO and MD students are going through that single accreditation matching system. So that's what residency directors are going to look at. They're going to look at board exams, and historically DO students have always taken both COMLEX and USMLE. And let me tell you this: if DO students are taking 2 really tough exams, because the COMLEX is technically like the USMLE,
it's the USMLE plus your physical exam.
Exactly. And if they can take 2 really intense exams and do well, to me that says a whole lot about DO students, right? But historically our students have been matching in really high residencies and competitive specialties. So I would say that is definitely a misconception.
I second everything he just said.
So going off of that then, is there a reason why a student would want to take both exams as opposed to just the COMLEX for DO students?
Yeah, so I know that students took both a USMLE and COMLEX, again, because they were those separate matching systems. So they took it because they could enter into the DO match as well as the allopathic match. But I don't believe now that residency directors are still on board with just accepting COMLEX. And I think those are the conversations that are actually being had at the higher level, which is even above like DO schools or MD schools in general. But those are the conversations that are actually taking place where, or advocates for osteopathic medical schools are arguing the point that if our students are taking the COMLEX, which is pretty much the USMLE, why are residency directors needing the USMLE? So not all do, but again, most of our students tend to take both because it just, it does make them a little bit more competitive just due to the fact that some residency directors are still wanting the USMLE. But students don't have to take both exams. You really don't. It's just something that each student might decide to do. But again, I think a lot is going to be changing. A lot has changed. The fact that we are in one matching system is huge, and it speaks to the changes that are going to be coming ahead. And I do think eventually residency directors are going to either accept USMLE or COMLEX. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I would second that. To go back to what I initially said about our mission and focus on graduate medical education through our residency readiness program. We actually have a team here at ACOM who works with you from almost day one of preparing you for what graduate medical education is going to look like. So preparing you for CV, what type of specialty you want versus what you need to be doing to prep for that, because not all residencies are created equal and not all residency programs are looking for the same stuff. So if you're looking to go into orthopedics, your CV is gonna look very different than somebody who's going into pediatrics or family medicine. And so we have a team that's committed full-time to doing nothing but helping our students prepare in that manner. And so if you have your heart set on a particular residency program, we know, and by we, I mean them, not me, they know what that residency and that residency director are looking for. So they can prep you for, okay, this residency director is still very much into the USMLE. And so you're going to need to be taking both versus, you can get by with just taking COMLEX. So, but I agree with Nigel. I think, and kind of tying back to the previous question, as more and more we get years underneath us where DO and MD are in the same match. And I do agree with him that in coming years, you're probably going to see more and more residencies taking either or, USMLE or COMLEX. That prestige piece that you're talking about, that is a myth, but it is out there. I think it's going to dissipate as well.
That's good to hear. We also have someone asking if schools prefer applicants to have more clinical research experiences or clinical patient care experiences, or if there's just a distinction between that in terms of importance.
For here at ACOM, all comms or SOMs, schools of medicine and colleges of medicine, osteopathic medicine, do some type of research. Sometimes it's bench, sometimes it's clinical, but you will be able to tell which ones are more heavy in the research arena and versus others. So because ACOM is more focused on educating physicians who are looking to actually be in the practice of physician versus the research, we do tend to put a little bit more emphasis on the clinical patient care experiences versus the clinical research. So I kind of approach it for, if you have research, it can only help, but if you don't have it, it's not going to hurt you at ACOM, not all other schools at ACOM.
Yeah, we're pretty similar as well. We don't put a big focus on students having to have research. Again, and it goes back to that finding value. If research was a big part of your undergrad journey, then that's going to be what is of value to you. So, one student might have lots of clinical experience and minimal research, while you may have lots of research and a little bit of clinical experience, but that's okay as well, right? Because that's part of your unique application and journey. So we don't necessarily prefer either or. It's whichever one you you actually did and find value in.
That sounds good. Currently, we don't have any more questions in the chat. Although
I don't know that we touched on, it was the, will there be a merge between schools into one program in the future? I don't think so. There is just that value of that holistic approach and that underlying philosophy of approach to how you treat patients in the DO world that I don't think that you'll see. I think we'll continue to see those two separate approaches to medicine.
Nigel, do you have anything else to add to that? To just repeat the question, it was, will there be a merge between DO and MD schools into one program in the future?
Yeah, and my answer is going to be exactly what Megan said. We don't know. Again, anything is possible, but I don't see that actually happening just due to the fact that, DO schools have its unique philosophy and the fact that students undergo that hands-on training, where allopathic students don't actually get that hands-on training early on. So to me, that's what's really gonna set apart DO students from MD students. And even though it's two different paths, the end goal is the same for both, MD and DO students.
Yeah, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that path to MD. Please understand that Nigel and I are neither one advocating for one over the other necessarily. They're just two very different approaches. And some fit better in the MD, some students fit better into the MD world, and some students fit better into the DO world. But I don't think you'll see DOs who are really passionate about that hands-on training being willing to give it up, which is essentially what they would have to do in order to create a merge. And I don't think you're going to see all MD physicians willing to pick it up. Like Nigel said, there are some that are doing that, but not all of them. And so to create that, you would have to see a significant shift in philosophy in one way or the other. And I don't think you're going to see that. Again, anything's possible. I never thought I'd live through a pandemic, so.
That makes sense. Thank you for clarifying that. I am seeing one last question in the chat, and it's, is the DO exam harder than the USMLE?
So I would say it's, in terms of, difficulty, it's probably the same because it's really testing on the majority of the same things. The only difference is that there are questions that are incorporated in the COMLEX that are directly to the osteopathic manipulative medicine. That's really the only difference. Other than that, you're going to be tested on pretty much the same exact things.
Yeah, that goes back to that, those competencies that I mentioned earlier, those 6 main competencies, like medical knowledge, team-based practice, practice-based learning, patient interaction, communication, professionalism, and I'm missing one and I can't remember what it is. Those are the same regardless of MD and DO. So if you look at the fact that MDs have 6, DOs have 7, and 6 of those 7 match, then by process of math, then the majority of the COMLEX exam is going to mirror the USMLE. You're going to have a small portion that's going to be different, but the majority of it is going to be the same because the majority of the material that you're learning is the same.
Okay, so if we don't have any more questions in the chat, that will bring an end to the session. So thank you, Megan and Nigel, for joining us today. And thank you to all of the students for attending as well.
Thank you guys so much for hosting, and I look forward to hopefully meeting some of you all on Friday.
Thank you. This was a really great and fun virtual event. So do feel free to reach out. Again, our open house is coming up, and to schedule a one-on-one if you need any help at all. This was really great. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.